safety protocol, and we wanted an opportunity to talk with parents and staff about some of the things that we're doing in the school district to make sure our schools are as safe as can be. We're hosted tonight by the Litchfield School District and also joined by and hosting the Litchfield Police Department and the Litchfield Fire Department. Our agenda for tonight is to start at 6 o'clock on time, so we check number 1 is done. We're going to do a school district overview, followed by comments from Litchfield Police, Litchfield Fire Department, and then we'll take questions and answers from the audience. So any questions that pop up during the time, we'll have plenty of time left at the end for those. And we do need to close at 7 o'clock because tonight is a school board meeting, and so we're going to continue on with the meeting right at 7. So we'll get through the presentation as fast as we can and leave time for Q&A. So joining me tonight, I am Superintendent Mike Jetty, and we have administrators from our 3 schools. Our assistant principals are the ones who sort of help to manage and oversee the emergency operation plans at each school. So I'll introduce Griffin Administrator Maura Clinton-Jones, Litchfield Middle School Administrator Martha Thayer, and Campbell High School Administrator Mike Perez. Joining us from Litchfield Police Department, we have Chief Joe O'Brien and Captain Ben Sargent. And from Litchfield Fire Department, we have Chief Frank Fritzl and Deputy Chief Doug Nickel. Thank you. We don't get that often, so that's really, that was impromptu. I didn't even say, let's give him a round of applause. Awesome. So a couple of key things. So obviously safety is something that we take very seriously. I'm a father of a 6-year-old and an 8-year-old, and so I think about what I expect of my schools when I send my children there, and that's what we try to deliver and bring to it here in the school district. So we really are paying attention to school safety and making it a big priority. ALiCE is a technique that we believe teaches us how to be safe during critical events. And so we have chosen last year to bring ALiCE in. You'll see in the ALiCE timeline how this has all come about, but it's something that we're doing to improve that safety. ALiCE has us reviewing case studies, so you simply are looking at situations that have happened across the U.S. and the world and learning from those events to see how we can be more safe in the Litchfield schools. We believe that knowledge for our staff increases their ability to make quick decisions, and that knowledge, therefore, improves safety for our students and staff. And in critical events, as has been seen through case studies, moments make a big difference. And so when making a life or death situation, you really want to be able to act quickly and to draw upon knowledge of previous events. So it's really a continual training piece for our staff going forward. I'm not going to read this slide because we all are here knowing that there are all sorts of awful, tragic events that have occurred across the U.S. Names like Columbine and Sandy Hook just conjure up an image that is very unpleasant, but we need to learn from those situations and figure out how to keep our schools as safe as possible. And actually, the history of school violence goes way, way, way back. It's not just beginning with some of the more recent events. And so drawing upon that vast history to help improve things is something that we are doing relative to tonight's forum and the ongoing training. The state of New Try it again. The state of New Hampshire is taking this very seriously. So Governor Sununu launched a task force. Anybody who's been around government circles knows that sometimes it takes a while to get things accomplished. This task force worked very quickly and produced an excellent resource manual for schools across the state. And this is one example of how we can disrupt the pathway to violence in our schools, and this is right out of the governor's task. See if we can make this one work. With me? Is it on? All right. So right out of that report, this is basically the concept that somebody has a concern with the school, and you can see that we're working hard. It's not just about hardening the schools and protecting the schools from a physical safety point of view. It's all about paying attention to the school culture, knowing what's going on when people have concerns, being sensitive and aware and responsive to those concerns, having behavioral intervention teams as the grievance turns into an idea, and then research and preparation for some sort of awful event to occur is ongoing. We as a school are able to respond to that. Of course, there does need to be some physical safety stuff, the hardening of the schools, and having responses. But hopefully, if we're doing things right by paying attention to the culture and having those behavioral intervention teams, we can avoid there ever being an issue. So really, it's important, I think, people understand that, you know, we can talk about cameras and locks and security measures, but there's a whole school culture piece that we have to pay attention to, because that is how these events can be avoided in the first place. So important that you understand we're coming at it from multiple angles. In the past, to help prepare, we've used the traditional lockdown approach. And so we've looked at locking doors, covering windows, turning off lights, being quiet, just sort of hunkering down and waiting for an all-clear signal. And the police in the past have used a contain and wait response. And what we've learned from all of these tragic events is that those aren't the best ways to respond. So we've learned that, in fact, evacuating by using intelligent escape. So you don't simply evacuate if the area around you is not safe. You want to get out if you can. But in fact, it's better to evacuate the space if there is something tragic happening inside. When we do lockdowns now, instead of simply hunkering down and being quiet, we have an enhanced lockdown. So if your only option is to lock in, you also want to barricade and take other measures to make sure that somebody can't get into that space. And finally, countering, that if in fact an intruder were to come into the space, to take action against that intruder by defending yourself. And you can see in the picture here that, you know, there's one photo that shows desks being put up against the doorway as a barricade. There's a second photo that shows people responding when somebody enters the room by throwing objects at the person, or actually I think the fire extinguisher is going to be pretty effective here. But the point is that, you know, you have to take some action against that situation. There's somebody coming in the room with the intent to do harm, and to simply wait and hunker down is not acceptable. And all the case studies have shown that that's really giving into the intruder, and it's important that people be ready to respond to that. So we know that any action is better than no action. Command and control of the situation are not the first priority. It is protecting life and limb. The traditional lockdown doesn't keep the intruder out, so taking enhanced lockdown is important. And basically, ineffective and incomplete safety protocols have led to the disastrous outcomes that we see on the news. So in the moment of decision, the best thing you can do is the right thing. The next best thing is the wrong thing, and the worst thing is to do nothing. And that's what we're trying to train our staff. So what is the right thing to do? Because we really want to do the best thing, the right thing. So what is ALiCE? Basically, it's a set of proactive options. It's been endorsed by the Department of Homeland Security, FEMA, the Department of Ed, multiple law enforcement agencies. It's not something we came up with. It's something that is endorsed by folks who have studied this way more in depth and have the info to share with us. A police officer and an elementary school principal got together and sort of developed the ALiCE protocol, so it is something that is a partnership between our law enforcement and our schools. And ALiCE teaches individuals to be active participants in their own safety while also leading others to safety when possible. And it's currently in place in thousands of schools and police departments across the nation. So it's maybe something new to us in Litchfield, but it has been tested in other communities. Basically, it is an acronym. I can't tell you why it's a lowercase I, it just is. But the acronym stands for A is alert, in other words, get the word out. So in the past, there have been, schools have used like code phrases to sort of describe stuff, and what we've learned is you need to just blast information out to people so that they know what is going on in the school. The lockdown is a good starting point, but we have to elevate our staff's response by taking some of the current technology and procedures to a higher level relative to that lockdown. We want to inform throughout an event so that everybody knows what is going on. Plus, the research shows that that keeps an intruder off balance by having information being shared, and that knowledge will empower the occupants of the building to make smarter choices. So that in that decision making, you want as much information as you can to make the best decision. Countering is a very age-appropriate thing. So what we would expect or ask our high school students to do is not what we would ask our PK students to do, right? So a pre-kindergartner is going to have a very different, listen to the teacher, follow those directions, than perhaps a high school football player who is in a different position to take some choices in terms of countering. So we'll talk further about that as we get into it. But basically, again, it's to distract and confuse the intruder. And finally, evacuating is not an all-out run for a door, but in fact, it's a smart, intelligent evacuation that you use if the area is clear, and you can make that safe exit. So these slides simply walk through what those are. So again, alert, so that folks are getting information using common plain language, providing factual and direct information to everybody in the building via the PA system, whatever communication tools you can use in that scenario. The lockdown is the semi-secure starting point, so you're going to secure the door, barricade the door, and even in the classroom, instead of huddling in a corner, you're going to spread out across the room, so that if somebody did get into the room, there's not a group of people in one spot, but in fact, there are people coming from left, right, up, down kind of thing, so that will help to control that situation better. The inform is to keep letting people know what's happening in real time, keeping 911 updated so that as our police are responding to a situation, they know what's going on, and using plain language again, so there's no codes, code blue in the cafeteria. What does that mean, right? So how am I supposed to respond upstairs in a science room when I hear that? Instead, we should be saying that, there's a person with a gun in the cafeteria. Okay, now I know what's going on there, and I know where I am and what options I have available. So that clear language is really important. Countering is really that last resort, so you've taken all the steps you can, and you now need to respond. So if an intruder were to get into your space, moving, scattering, keeping in mind that it's difficult to hit a moving target, so keeping on the move would be important, interrupting, distracting the attacker, throwing items, books, balls, chairs, objects that you have in that situation. And then evacuate, getting out as quickly and as safely as you can, nearest exit, and then to get as far away from the danger as possible. So once out of the building, to keep going and get as far as you can. We have a little video that's going to walk us through that, and so I'm simply going to hit play on this and trust somebody can control the sound if it's too loud. But this will help you once again to see what ALiCE is all about. No, it won't.
If there is an intruder in your school, you need to know the options and actions available to help keep yourself safe. The ALiCE acronym is something you should remember. ALiCE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, Evacuate. These are not step-by-step instructions. It is just a way to remember multiple options if you ever find yourself in a dangerous situation. Alert is the signal that something is wrong. In a school, this could typically be over the intercom, or you may hear or see something yourself. An alert could be witnessed in person, but also through text message, phone call, or social media. If you are alerted of a threat at school, you should notify a teacher, administrator, or others in the area immediately. Lockdown means you should barricade yourself in the nearest available room or space if it is not safe to leave where you are. Pile large objects and furniture in front of the entrance to the room. It is important to refrain from huddling in a corner. You want to stay out of sight from the intruder, away from hallway windows, and spread out into the classroom with something in your hand. Use objects to throw at the intruder to distract or stop them if they enter the room. Any distraction in that circumstance can make a difference. If you are in lockdown, stay there until you believe it is safe to leave or until law enforcement finds you. Inform can be done in a variety of ways, and everyone experiencing this threat can help get information out. If you are in immediate danger, use a cell phone to call 911. Tell them where you are and what is happening. You can also text to spread and receive information. Administrators are responsible for providing updates to those in the building. Administrators should, if possible, send email updates to teachers, or, if appropriate, speak again over the intercom if the situation has changed in any way. Counter is something you should only do if the intruder enters your space. When you are in lockdown, you should always try to have something in your hand to use as a weapon to throw at the intruder. In schools, there are fire extinguishers every 75 feet, which could be used as both a weapon and a distraction tool. If the intruder enters your space and becomes distracted, leave the space immediately. If you are able to get the weapon away from the intruder, place the weapon in a wastebasket or other container and turn it over to the police. Remember, do not hold the weapon. Police are looking for a person with a weapon and may confuse you with the intruder. Evacuating is the preferred option if it is safe to do so. If at any time it is safe to flee the situation, please evacuate. If you feel the intruder is near, running in zigzag patterns may make you a more difficult target. Sometimes a window may be the only option to escape. Your main goal when there is an intruder is to get out. Remember, ALiCE is not a step-by-step process. It provides you with a list of options if you are ever in a situation faced with an armed intruder in your building. The ALiCE protocol can be used in dangerous situations in schools, businesses, and public places. Law enforcement officers pledge to do whatever is necessary to prevent or end any threat to public safety. Thank you.
So notice that this video was put together by the Tewksbury Police Department. So this is, again, something that is being used in some places in the area and in the region. I think that video makes a point that I didn't make, and that is that ALiCE is not an incremental acronym. You don't do A.L.I.C.E. You draw from that depending on what the situation is that you have so that you can then respond to it. So it's possible that evacuating is the right move for your class, and so then you would make that decision and lead that evacuation without necessarily going through a lockdown. So it's really responsive to the situation. Perfect. So now I'm going to invite the administrators up, and they're going to walk through a little bit how that response differs. So we'll start with our PK4 level. Maura.
So we've kind of broken our building up into two parts. So for the pre-K to second grade level, we would be using the book. You can see the cover of it on the screen, called I'm Not Scared, I'm Prepared. This is actually, you can find it on YouTube being read aloud, and they turn the pages of the book, and you can see it that way, or a teacher could read it to the class as well. And then some activities about that as well. The book is sort of talks about the bad guy as a wolf, and talks about the kids and the teachers and the adults in the building as the sheep. And then the shepherd is kind of in charge. And that's where we're coming from at our level. For us, the teacher's going to be in charge, and we want to talk to the kids about doing what your teacher asks you to do. We will, for grades 3 and 4, so going down that chart, we'll do the same thing, use that book and comprehension activities surrounding it. But in addition to that, we're looking and have seen some videos that are online that show a police officer who's leading a group of kids, elementary kids, talking about assorted safety drills, fire drills. One was a tornado drill, and then they were also talking about some of the ALiCE protocols. So this is something where the police officer is interacting with a group of kids and asking questions, and again, trying to hit home what we were talking about, and we're going to continue talking about, that the teacher's in charge, and you want to make sure that you're following the teacher's directions, and they're going to let you know what to do. So for both groups, from pre-K all the way up to 4th, we're going to do initially, we're going to do an ALiCE drill where we stay in class. So we'll make an announcement, talk about what the situation is and where it is in the building, and then have the students and the teacher problem solve what they would do depending on their location in the building. From there, we'll go to towards working towards a drill where the kids would actually leave the room if they were going to do that, or maybe barricade the door if they were going to do that. Again, that depends on where the situation is.
So next, Ms. Thayer will present the 5-8 preparation.
So similarly, we will have a meeting with the students, a principal-led assembly, where we will introduce ALiCE to the students, and then from there they will also see the video. The video that you just saw is the one that we will be using in our school. They will then go to a class, whichever class that they would go to, either homeroom or maybe one of their enrichments, so that all of the teachers are involved. And there would be a class review of ALiCE and the different scenarios and options that they would have. And then at the end, there would be a question and answer with the students, talking about what they've learned, how it's different from what we've done in the past, and just general feelings on how that would work. Our protocol always, when we do drills, is with the first drill, we always announce it, and we go through the steps in the school so that the students know that the drill is coming and that they know what they should be doing. We would do the same thing with any of the ALiCE drills, especially as they are new and being rolled out. We would do a role play. We would have an administrator explain that we were in the process of an ALiCE drill. We would give information like we would expect to hear if that in a real situation. We would also use a whistle or an air horn to kind of locate where a gunshot might be heard. And then the teachers from that point would work with the students and discuss what options they have, what situations they're in, depending on their place in the school, and how they would respond effectively. From there, we would then roll out more drills until the point where we would probably have them at some point leave the school and gather in one area as a drill. So.
And finally, the high school preparation, grades 9 through 12.
So very similar to the middle school, we'll probably meet as advisories first. We'll have a scripted training session for the students. We will do question and answers with the students as well. We'll have the ALiCE video to show them. I believe it's going to be the high school version of similar to this. And then what we'll be doing is we'll be drilling. And with the help of Litchfield PD, we have Dave Donnelly, Officer Dave Donnelly, in the building. With his help, we'll be doing a simulated drill. And this is where, at the high school level, it does get a little bit more real when it comes to the conversations, at least. So we'll be talking that through. They'll be using the whistles, they'll be using the air horns to simulate firearms. Students will actually be going through, we have some ideas, we haven't solidified exactly what that's going to look like yet at the high school, but it is going to be a little bit more real life kind of feel, just because we can, because they're older, a little bit more mature. And again, you will be notified before we do the training session, and then you'll be notified, especially during the first drill, you'll be notified before the drill happens and after the drill happens.
Thank you, and I did not introduce Mike Perez, the assistant principal at the high school. So how can parents help us? So this is really a general overview of how parents can help the schools to keep the schools safe. So we want you communicating with your child about school safety. That's important. You should be having those talks at home about safety. Making sure that your children are not bringing anything into the school that could be considered a weapon. So it's important that any objects stay at home. And really, if you see something, say something. If your gut is telling you something isn't quite right, speak up. There's no such thing as too many phone calls about concerns. We will be responsive to those concerns. So again, speak up. And appropriate use of social media. A lot of this stuff ends up taking place on social media and then sort of escalating from there. And so monitoring your own child's use of social media or the overall use. And if you see something on social media that's concerning, to let us know or let the police department know right away. So monitoring that would be a key thing parents ought to do. It's not spying. They're minors. You need to monitor some of that use, right? And then pay attention to any sudden changes in mood or behaviors of your own children or other children in the neighborhood, because when you see that, it's important that somebody be aware of that so that a response can be made to that and to check that out. So that back to that slide on behavioral intervention, you are in the best position to see if something is not right. Well, I guess our staff are also, but it still should come in so that we can be responsive to it. So police, principal, social worker would be happy to get any concerns or hear any concerns so that we can do the follow-up. If you do have any guns at home or weapons at home, making sure those are secure and that students don't have access to them, because typically when you dissect these situations, they somehow got their hands on an unsecured weapon, and anything you can do to help with that would be helpful to the school. making sure that your contact information is always updated. You know, I sent the blast out about this, the email blast, and it came back that, you know, there was something like 4% of the email addresses that it couldn't deliver it to. So there's always a certain amount of misinformation in our system, but as soon as you change an email, phone number, any kind of information, keep it up to date, because if we were using that in an emergency situation, we want to make sure it gets out, right? So always keep that up to date. And remember that if there were to be a school safety incident, we want you to refer to the parent protocol, which it says send home in the fall. We're sending it home now in the spring, but here is a protocol sheet that talks about what to do. The key thing is to look at our website for updated information and to keep a safe distance from school. As police and fire are responding to a critical incident in a school, I know it's hard. If I was a parent, I would want to be there to do what I could for my children, but I have to trust the professionals are doing what they need to do. And one more car on the road, one more car blocking an entrance, one more parent running around who they're trying to secure a situation, it's not helpful. And so, you know, if something tragic were to occur, we would want parents to really follow directions and know that the professionals have it under control and are doing the absolute best they can, and we will get information out to parents. I know it's hard, but really important. So it's really our responsibility as a community, the Litchfield community, to keep each other safe. And so if you hear any threat of violence, alert or inform, right out of ALiCE. Alert and inform, and if you see something, say something. So please take those steps. We all have to help. I'm going to ask our business administrator, Corey Isbicki, to come up, and he's going to go over a little bit of some of the things that we have done as a school district to help prepare for where we are tonight.
So in April of 2016, the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management did a security assessment at all three of our buildings. Since that time, we've used those recommendations to do some work at each building. Access points to the buildings using fob readers, the access policies for each building, and working towards securing all the entrances. We've done work through the State Infrastructure Fund at GMS to put in a secure vestibule so we can restrict access. So when people come in, they have to check in with the main office first, and the main office can identify them before they come in. We're working on projects. We have secured infrastructure grant funding for the other two buildings. We're working on getting those entryways secured as well. Working on numbering all the windows and doors at all the schools to make sure that police and fire know where people are in case of emergency, they can identify where they are in the building. So as we go forward, we'll continue working with Homeland Security, with the police and fire, to better secure all our buildings and how to best secure the classrooms within the school in case of an event. The ALiCE, this started back in pretty much when I first came into the district about a year and a half ago, with just trying to bring ALiCE into the district. So now we had a couple issues with trying to get a training done, which on election day of last year, we had a snowstorm that was supposed to be the initial day for our ALiCE training. We had to back that up to September of this year. That starts with online certification for all staff, and we'll have to renew that in the next school year with all new people coming on board. So as of right now, as you can see by the timeline, we've met with police and fire. We've gone through some of the things that we're doing at each building, meeting with our district team here tonight at our community information meeting, and we will now continue going forward with getting our emergency operation plans updated for all three buildings, making sure that we are ALiCE Training Institute compliant and certified as a certified district. And as new teachers come in, as I said, we will continue to get people trained with that online certification.
And so now I'm going to invite our police department, so Chief Joe O'Brien and Captain Ben Sargent, up to offer a few comments about what Litchfield Police has done in response to some of these situations and preparation.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm your police chief, Joe O'Brien. This is my captain, Ben Sargent. Over the past few years, we've done training on active shooter in the schools. We've trained our staff on how to approach a situation like that. In the past, what would happen is if there was an active shooter in the school, the protocol was to wait outside until the SWAT team showed up or more officers. That, in a lot of these shootings, has shown that more students are getting killed and getting injured. So the new protocol now that we're sending an officer to the training the end of next month is called Raider. And what that is, it's because we're a small community, we may have 2 police officers on duty. So when if a situation happens in town, the training is going to be any officer that's on duty. If there's 1 officer or if there's 2 officers, they're going to enter the building and they're going to eliminate the threat. There's no more waiting for backup and stuff like that. You're going to go in, they're going to eliminate the threat. All of our staff should be trained within the next few months on that. We've had new protocols that we put in place for the active shooter. We've also done some incident command policies, which is going to be, will dovetail with the fire department, the school department, and the police department. And those policies will all mesh together so that when and if a situation ever happens here, that'll be handled. We'll all know how we're handling that. I did read the Parkland shooting report that came out over the past month or 2. It's very disturbing. And some of the stuff that you read is stuff that are some of the problems that we have here. And those are being addressed thanks to the SAU, the school board, police department, and fire department. We've seen some situations such as camera access. At Parkland, they had camera systems in the school, but there was no access for the police to see this. When they finally did get access, it was 20 minutes after the shooting, but they're looking at this like it's real time. So the officers are responding to the 2nd and 3rd floor like it's an active shooter, and this kid's already at Walmart, 20 minutes later. So we've addressed some of those. We're looking at a memorandum of understanding with the school, some different policies that we're going to put into place, that the SAU is going to put into place. There's some equipment that we purchased over the past year, and those are the bulletproof vests that are in each one of the cruisers, and these are the ones that would handle a rifle round. The vests that officers wear now are just for pistol rounds. So every single cruiser now has the larger capacity rounds that would stop. We just purchased 2 of the bulletproof shields that officers have. Right now, we currently have it on in the 2 day shift cars. They each have the shields in their vehicles. So in the event of an emergency, they would have that protection. They would also have the bulletproof vest that would stop a high capacity round. We're going to continue with the training, working with the school, working with the SAU. And that's about what I have right now. You have anything, Cam?
Excellent. Thank you,
Thank
Chief.
you.
And one thing that wasn't mentioned is a real commitment from the police department for our school resource officers. So we have an SRO that is assigned here to Campbell High School, and we have a second officer from Litchfield Police who has been assigned to Griffin and Litchfield Middle. So it's really helpful that we have officers that are able to understand exactly what the school layout is, who the parents are that are coming and going, by being boots on the ground in the schools. That's a very helpful situation. Next up, I'm going to invite Litchfield Fire Department, so Chief Freitzel and Deputy Chief Nickel, to come up. As they're coming up, I just want to point out that we had a meeting last week in preparation for this, and the chief invited the deputy fire marshal from the state to sort of take a look at our PowerPoint, and he was quite impressed. He said, everything you're doing is really aligned with all the best practices, the governor's task force, et cetera. And he complimented Litchfield and the way we're working together. And so I thought it was important that the chief brought somebody from the state fire marshal's department. I also think it was important that they acknowledge we're on the right track and doing the right things.
Thank you, Mike, and good evening. As Mike said, we've been working on this for a while now, and we've talked a lot about what happens or how things are handled when something happens. We tend to look on the fire side in the planning and prevention aspect. So one of the things that we look at is what can we do ahead of time to prepare the building and utilize features of the building. And to that extent, if you go on and you Google school security, there's 1,000,001 makeshift ways to secure a classroom door, to secure a hallway door, and so forth. Not many of them, though, are compliant with fire code and safety codes for egress should there be a fire and so forth. So one of the things that we look at is what is the safest way to provide security but not impede safety and exiting should there be an incident that involves fire and so forth. I did invite Deputy Marshal Sean Toomey from the State Fire Marshal's Office because they have been heavily involved in that. Prior to the Governor's Task Force, Deputy Toomey and I actually sat on a couple of the working groups for the Governor's Task Force on school safety, so I would encourage you to look at that. As Mike said, it's up on the Homeland Security website, so just Google New Hampshire Homeland Security, and you'll be able to find a link to that school security feature. So I think one of the things that hasn't been mentioned, but we did discuss is, as we go forward, the district is going to be looking at, means to secure the doors that couple things, cannot be used maliciously, because that is a concern, that can be what we call breached by police or fire. After the threat has been neutralized, we need to be able to get in, clear the school, assess and triage casualties, evacuate the casualties, and so forth. So if there's doors, chairs and tables are a great thing, but that can impede progress for us to get through. So there's other methods, locking systems and so forth, that we meaning police and fire have access to the keys or the systems to unlock them that we're looking at, rather than putting a deadbolt in that can only be unlocked from the inside of the room with a key. If something were to happen to the teacher or whoever the adult in the room that has the key, whether they have a medical emergency because of the issue or they are injured as part of it, and students don't know how to operate or have a way, and then we can't get in, we can't help them, it delays the process. So those are some of the things that are also being looked at that are behind the scenes, if you will. In a true emergency, we have started to train our people, our firefighters, in responding to such an incident. There's a couple of different levels, and we'll ultimately actually be working with the police department, the regional SWAT team or special operations team, and we will have firefighter paramedics and EMTs embedded with those units going in to secure the school and evacuate injured. Under police protection, firefighters will be evacuating those that are injured and getting them out of the building. If you had told me 35 years ago when I joined the fire department someday I would be putting my people into ballistic gear, I would have said never. But that's the era we live in today. So we are working towards that. We also, as you all know, we utilize Hudson as our ambulance service, so we're coordinating that effort with them so that when they respond, they are trained as well to work as part of what we call a rescue task force. And as the chief alluded to, any type of a major incident would be cooperatively managed by the senior-most police official, the senior-most fire official, the representative of the individual school, because they know that school the best, and then obviously somebody from the SAU. And then I'll close with, on the legislative side, this is, as Mike said, a very hot topic for Governor Sununu. Being involved in the fire service for a number of years, I can assure you that this is one of the fastest pieces of government work I've ever seen for this school security program, and the governor was very, very hard on the Homeland Security to get it done in a very timely fashion. And some of the things that came out of that is looking at school systems. For example, the fire alarm system. Case studies have shown that individuals have gone in, pulled the fire alarm, pulled the pull station at the door because they want the building evacuated in order to carry out their plan. The systems nowadays with technology can have the ability to be programmed to do sequential alarming, meaning that if a pull station is pulled, it's not going to trip the fire alarm as it typically would. It's going to create an alarm in the office or at a constantly monitored spot. And then if a second alarm comes in within a certain time period, a smoke detector or another pull station, then it would activate the fire alarm system. But this kind of helps to manage the use of the fire alarm system and other things for nefarious actions. So, I'll close that. Anything? So, I should say, Deputy Nickel and the full-time staff are in the schools on a regular basis conducting fire drills. House Bill 123 is actually going to change the legislation from 10 fire drills a year to allow for up to 4 to 5 of these type drills, where now I think it only allows 2. It's going to allow four more, so it'll be a total of 6 actually, for lockdown and these type of school security drills. So that legislation is being fast-tracked through the State House as we speak. So thank you.
Thank you. And as you saw in one of the slides, school safety really is an evolving thing, so I hope you're getting the signal that we're working very collaboratively on it as we identify things like the different locking systems. I mean, I don't like the idea of stacking desks. If we could have our teachers set with something that is quick and easy for them to deploy that's just as effective, let's figure out how to do that, and then we'll work that into our budget and bring that forward to the school board. So there are options that we're learning about and are trying to figure out how to get into play as it evolves. So we're up to the questions point, and I would just invite people to come down to a mic so that everybody can hear it, and then we'll do our best to answer from whoever the right person is. So I see a hand already, so come on down. We'll hand this one over.
I'm pretty loud. I could have done it without the microphone. I just have a quick question. My daughter's in the portables, and I don't know if I feel that they're as safe as inside the school. It looks like a weapon could go right through the portables. And they're in that little space, and there's 2 doors that could very easily be, commandeered by 2 individuals. And also you've got disgruntled children that are often pulling off these nefarious actions. How do you know, or how do you prevent them from getting in the school? You've got 5th graders going in and out of LMS all the time. I'm at the school like 3 times a week. So I see that they have to go in and out to use the bathrooms. So I'm just curious what the protocol is for those little guys.
Yeah, and as you know, we have portables in 2 locations. So I'm actually going to ask the elementary and middle school folks to respond to just some of the special things that we do to pay attention to the portables. And the principals are here also if they need to chime in. Okay. You want to start with the...
So for us at the elementary school, a little bit different. Mrs. Romano, we don't let the kids go in and out on their own. They always have an adult with them. We have to trust whatever device we're going to use to lock the doors. We're going to work on that is going to work for us so that we can make sure, regardless of the type of building or the type of doors there are, that we can't people can't get into the building. So if we have a lockdown, everyone can hear that, regardless of what building you're in. The portables can hear the announcement as well, or if we have an ALiCE drill or whatever we're saying the issue is. So we want the teachers to listen to where the situation is, because speaking from our building, if it's way in the back where 1st grade is, then that's going to be a different scenario for the folks in the portable, and they might choose a different option. But if they need to stay in their room, then we want to make sure, as we were talking about the locking system, that we have the means to secure the doors that way. Right, and that part I can't answer. That.
I mean, I think that's an absolute reality to the situation, right? So you're right. The walls on that are not the same as a 8-inch thick concrete block, right? So it is a different scenario. But we could play the what if game over and over again, right? Because there's just a lot of different scenarios that could play out. You know, I think our key thing is back to the prevention piece. If somebody were to have that nefarious thing, how do we learn about that and avoid it? The research shows, so the Secret Service did a study on the shootings, and they found that in almost every scenario, there were people with advance warning of what was going to occur. And then in some cases, they were reported into police departments and there wasn't a follow-up that was done. So I think the more we can be on the front end of it, we can help to avoid some of that stuff. But, you know, then it goes to, well, what if it were to occur when students were passing from a portable into the cafeteria, right? And so now there's absolutely nothing in between. So, you know, we can, I hate to say it, but we can do the what if game on and on. I mean, playground time, right, is another scenario where people are simply outside and there isn't any protection. So just understand that we're doing the best that we can in all of these scenarios and trying to come up with as much safety as we can with it.
Is there some kind of protocol that you guys can research for that? Because my daughter's panicked, so she's going to want to know.
Is she elementary or middle? Middle school. Okay, let me have the middle school address where they are, because their scenario is even different, because like you said, the bathroom is inside for the 5th graders versus at the elementary school, the portables have a bathroom. So there's a different game change, right? So how do we address that at the middle school?
So with regard to the building, I don't have an answer for that with the safety of if a bullet was coming through. I don't have an answer for that. With regard to passing, they typically pass at the same time. Those who don't have a pass that they have to wear that lets them in. So the teacher in the building knows that they're there. We typically know, and I can pretty much guarantee, because I deal with if they're taking too long or not somewhere, they call the office and they want to know where they are. Typically, they've taken a little detour to the nurse's office, but the teachers will notify us if the kids are gone longer than they feel they should be. They do move, typically as groups, for lunch and in between classes. There are occasions when they do move individually if they need to get into the building to use the bathroom or to go to the nurse or to the office for some reason.
And I was just reminded that as part of this security audit, we have installed speakers on the outsides of the building so that if people were passing from one part to another, they could get communication, so they could at least know that something was going on. I guess previously we didn't have the speakers on the outside, but now we can get that information shipped out that way. So thank you for that. I don't know, is there anything else on the portables that you would want to add from police or fire, or did that hit it? All right, so we have a question here, and I think I have somebody else here, so I'll just alternate, I guess. And one person I want to introduce, I failed to do this, but Michelle Flynn, who works in the SAU office, she sort of coordinates all of us, right? She keeps me on track and keeps us on task with our emergency planning stuff. Michelle's writing down all the questions because I want our team to be able to take this back, and if our answers are off the cuff and not as good as they could be, we're going to figure that out and get at them. So, you know, I hadn't even thought about the portables. It's a great question. We'll take that one back and do, I hadn't thought about somebody shooting into a portable, I should say. So we'll take that back and work on that to see if there's anything we can do. Maybe eliminate the portables, but we can get to that some other day, right? So anyway, okay.
New building. Oh, this isn't on. This isn't on.
Oh.
Do you want me to go over there?
There it is.
Hello? Okay. So I have a couple of questions. I'm sorry, they should be really quick, and a couple of comments, but I'm really glad we're doing this because maybe to help answer your question with the portables, we're finally empowering our kids to do something. Honestly, I have a 7th grader, and I asked him what he would do if there was a lockdown and he was in the bathroom, and he said, I don't know. And he said he'd try to get back in the room, and I said, but they're not going to let you in. What would you do? He still didn't know. I said, if there's an exit, get out. Where do I go? just keep running, they'll find you. So I think that that's maybe one thing, is that we're at least empowering the kids to be able to do something. So thank you for bringing this forward. I just have a question about the drills. Are police going to be present for the drills at all the buildings to maybe give feedback on how they go, things that you can improve, things like that? Is that going to happen? Yes? Okay. That's great.
I think we had on the slide that we wanted to do it in partnership. So when
Okay,
we did the
perfect.
ALiCE training, we had officers here on site and at the other schools. So they participated, they saw what was going on, and learned those responses that we're teaching our staff. So we would expect to continue to partner with them throughout all of this rollout and training.
And our officers are attending the ALiCE training the same as the teachers.
Great.
And I think we have a principal, right, Mike, you're going to attend the same or a similar training for the ALiCE, so we'll have administrators trained in the same point of view. So it'll just enhance us, our ability to keep working together.
Awesome. So I'm glad you showed the governor's task force and that hierarchy, or, you know, how to break the, you know, intervene. And I'm glad we're doing ALiCE, but what behavioral interventions, is that going to be part of this group, this safety group, that we're going to be talking about behavioral interventions? And, you know, if you see something, say something, kids are going to feel empowered. What doesn't look right to become a community? What, you know, I participated in Challenge Day. I think that's maybe part of what is happening here, but can you maybe talk a little bit more about that plan?
Yeah, so I think there are, I think Challenge Day is the type of thing that we want to do more of, to have our students build a stronger sense of community. And we're examining everything across the board. I mean, you've got an advisory program at the high school. High schoolers will say, you know, what are we doing in advisory? All we do is bond. Yep, that's right, because people are getting to know you, you're getting to be known as an individual, and so all those things are just ways that we enhance the school community's ability to respond to it. I see our special ed administrator, Devin Bandersky, is with us tonight. She just recently attended a training on, and has attended numerous trainings on trauma-sensitive schools. So when you have students who are coming from a background where they've had trauma, making sure that we have the right social workers and protocols in place to be responsive to that. And so we're really enhancing our ability to be responsive. Two board members, Ms. McDonald and Mr. Myers, also attended that trauma-sensitive school training, so that from a policy angle, they can understand it and help to respond. So it's all networking and coming together to make that happen.
Awesome. And then I guess I just have two recommendations. I work in a school too. I've been through a lot of these trainings as well. One wonderful thing that I came across was I saw Scarlett Lewis talk, who is the mother of a Sandy Hook victim, and she has a free K-12 social emotional. I know that's a tough word to put out right now, but that intervenes, and she's amazing to see as far as that kind of stuff intervening ahead of time. And then one of the things that we struggle with our district, and we've tried to do, is when something like this does happen, is what are we going to do with all the parents? Because no matter how many times you tell them not to come, they're going to come. And, you know, you're not always going to have the luxury of a computer at your hands and being able to do that, and what other avenues can you get out the information from? We have a glove box thing, because, you know, parents are going to be right in their car trying to come get their children, and we have just a glove box pamphlet that tells parents where to go and what to do, because we're going to be reunifying somewhere else. We're not going to be at the school, because that's a basically crime scene at the moment. So it's just something that we thought to do, so parents will always have it on hand to be able to find what they're doing. And I'm sorry, I just thought of one more thing. Sorry. You have everybody says there's going to be an announcement made over the speakers, and I know as a principal, I'm hardly ever in my office. I'm out in my building somewhere, but we have every single person in our building has a walkie-talkie, and I don't even call drills anymore. They call the drills. I walk in and I say, call lockdown, call whatever, but everybody can hear it no matter where they are from building to building, and it's every single staff member, paraprofessionals included. So we're just not always going to have that. I don't know if you guys have more ways to communicate. Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. And I just think elementary too, like with kids walking in the hallway, you're out in the playground, just having something else to be able to communicate. But thank you guys for doing this.
To Mr. Lecletter's point, we're updating the systems, the phone system at LMS and GMS to be able to do the same all-call function that we have here at the high school. So that's something that'll be done over the summer.
Two things. That blue handout that Paula had in her hand, put that in your glove box, because that has a lot of that has a lot of information on it, and so it really is intended. We're going to update that pretty frequently, but there's a lot of information on there that can help parents, so that if you were to get a blackboard announcement that something had happened and you're like, what do I do? If that's in your glove box and you know where it is, I think that could be helpful. And you know, I want to point out too that we have fenced in our playgrounds as ways to sort of segregate off that area. So I mean, there are steps that we are taking to try to make the schools as safe as they can be. I had another point from Paula's question, and it's out of my head, so it'll come back to me and I'll bring it up. But you were next up with a question.
So I had a couple of questions as well, but they'll be pretty quick. One, I'm a substitute teacher, and I know nothing about what to do. So I think that's really important for substitute teachers to be trained on as well. Another thing is, I had a question about, this is the only school that has 2 floors, but are there ways for students, teachers, anybody to get from upstairs, out the windows, down safely? Ladders, anything like that?
Great question. So we absolutely are, we've been talking about all of our training for subs, right? So we unfortunately have a number of substitutes that we need to have in the building, or fortunately, because we have great people who come in to help us. And so we want to make sure that you're getting trained on all these updated protocols. So that communication will be coming. In terms of second floor, you know, unfortunately, to get ladders to all those windows is probably not likely. It's more likely that you're hanging somebody out the window and they're taking a drop. But again, if you're reaching that level of evacuation, you've got a pretty dire situation in the building, and you know, a broken ankle is small in comparison. So it's something that we can deal with.
Like the fire ladders that attach to the window.
Yeah, we could probably look at something like that, because you're right, this is our only second floor, but we'll take a note of that and see if there is something. But in that dire emergency, I think, you know, somebody jumping out the window, plus the kids are more flexible than the staff, to be honest, so I think I'd worry more about me jumping out a window, but yeah. Thank you for that, and thanks for being a sub.
One more thing.
Yep.
So I just recently heard that we have, in the town of Litchfield, a lot of police officers from other towns. We have that live in Litchfield but are from other towns. If there was an emergency situation, would those police officers or law enforcement be allowed to come into the schools and help? If they're at home, can they come and help? And is there a way to set up an alert system for all the police officers in town, whether they're Litchfield police or not, that they could come and help very quickly?
We'll let the chief address that one.
Thank you.
I can answer that. We have mutual aid with all 28 towns in Hillsborough County. We did have a situation in at 31 Page Road. Myself and the captain were there, where it was an active shooter. And believe me, within 2 or 3 minutes, we had probably 30 or 40 police officers there. A number of people that live in town. The colonel lives in town. So we have a great response. We're in a good location in New Hampshire. We have mutual aid with Londonderry, Hudson, Manchester, you know, all the surrounding communities, and a lot of those people do live in town.
the fire department will weigh in. I just want to point out, and I'm not trying to cut it short, we are at the 7 o'clock point where we have a board meeting, so we'll answer if there's one more question. Is there anybody else with one? So we got one here and one here. Let's take those two, and then we'll bring this to a close, but some folks can hang out if there are direct questions to be asked. So.
Just real quick, on the second floor, one of the things Mike mentioned early on was numbering doors and windows outside. That's part of the reason. If we have somebody that's trapped, be it a fire, be it a active shooter situation, if they give us a room number, we'll be able to tell that room from the outside and get to them quicker. So that is, again, one of the things that we've done to help that situation. So.
Okay, so question here and then from here. Do you want to yell it, or let's? I'll repeat it for the folks at home.
Okay, thank you. I'm a kindergartner, and I appreciate the need to make an announcement that's not a code blue. But how do I help prepare her? How does she not get traumatized by this idea that there's an active shooter in her school and she's only 5 years old? And what language can I use at home? What can I do to make sure that either before the drill or after the drill that she can process this at such a young age?
So I'm going to ask our elementary people to address that. I'll talk from the father point of view just quickly. I mean, I try to be as direct and clear as I can and to use language that I feel they can handle. I try to answer it directly, and if they seem to understand it, I stop. Like, I don't keep going at it, right? So that's just some of the advice that I've been given in terms of how to respond as a father with a youngster. You know, and I use general terms like, you know, somebody who wants to hurt you. So we don't say somebody with a gun because I'm not really sure what that would even mean to them. And so I say, you know, if somebody wanted to hurt you, what are the things you could do? So I sort of keep it to that level, and then as they get older, I think adjust the language up. But that's me winging it as a father. Now I'll let a professional educator from the elementary level step in.
I think you have a great question. The book that we were talking about, I'm Not Scared, I'm Prepared, talks, like I said, in really young, child-friendly terms. And I think that's a good introduction to what we're doing. I think that we're going to have to give it some time and kind of move in stages. At some point, if there's really an emergency, we're going to have to be clear what that emergency is. And I think that when we're starting this and sort of introducing the book, kids are familiar with, you know, a stranger or a bad guy and that type of piece and using that to start. But the reality is that at some point, I think we're probably going to have to talk at least about a gun, someone with a gun or an intruder or whatever word we are using, not to traumatize the kids, but just when we have a situation, we're not going to talk about the wolf and the sheep on the intercom. So it's kind of moving in the direction of you know, a starting point where everyone can, even our youngest kids can understand, but moving towards having to use some plain language, even if it's maybe not as specific and graphic that you might do when the kids are older. Our emergency response team in the building continues to work on precisely how we want to word it. We're not quite there yet. Thank you.
And we had another question here. That never happens to me. Yep, I'm actually going to let our principals answer that. So cell phones at the elementary, I don't think they have them up to grade 4. Does anybody have a 4th grader with a cell phone? Okay, good. But if they had one, you know, I would assume it would be restricted to like emergency use, and it has to be put away during the day, right? So middle school is going to be a little more prevalent, I suspect. But let's be real. So there's an actual situation, right? chances are that somebody will start to do some communication, right? So I would think that would occur, right? And so it's going to be almost uncontrollable in that scenario. Remind me, the issue was on reunification. I'm going to come back. That's what I couldn't remember before. We'll come back to it in a second. Mike, at the high school with cell phones?
At the high school kid, you're not gonna tear their cell phone away from them. So, in the classroom is teacher discretion. A lot of times, they text back and forth with each other. Some of these kids can text without even looking. So, but they can have it in the morning. They can have it at the caf during lunch. A lot of them just listen to music, and then it's just teacher discretion. It's been less prevalent in classes just because of the Chromebooks, but I mean, they have them in their back pockets, they have them in their backpacks. I mean, it's just a way of life now. So, yeah, the lack of, I mean, if a classroom has to go into the lockdown, I don't know one teacher that will say, put that cell phone away, so, yeah.
Yeah, that's why I was just wondering what's allowed to actually happen.
Yeah.
And I think just a word of caution, I mean, you probably had the experience where the information being transmitted isn't always accurate, right? So just keep that piece in mind, that you are getting info, but remember, that's not official. It's a child's perception of something. And so look for those official information, because that really is the best way to know what's going on. Back to the reunification. So somebody had asked a question like, okay, you're training kids to evacuate. They're literally running away from the school. How do we find them later? And we can assure you from all these case studies that nobody later is stressed about the school not knowing where a child ended up when we confirm the child is safely out of the school, right? And so we're going to work on our protocol on where to go, but there's actually some research saying not to designate, like the high school will go to Dara Pond. That actually might not be the best thing to do, because then somebody who is a secondary assailant could know, okay, I know they're all coming to Dara Pond, so I'll wait over there, right? So we're working on how do we get to this point. We think the safest thing to do is to, wherever you are, to reunify back at the school site, because when there are 300 police officers here, it's probably the most secure place to be. And so to teach kids to come back and check in with a member of law enforcement at the school, but we would want to train students on how to do that. I mean, you see these awful scenarios where everybody's walking with their hands up and so forth, but that's really necessary in these kinds of situations. And so we want to continue to work on that protocol. Another option is to go home. If you can safely make your way to home, go to home. We'll find you later, right? We'll know that everybody is safe at a later point. So we are working on how to respond in those scenarios. So I want to thank you. 50 people coming out to participate in this conversation. Not a pleasant conversation, right? None of us want to be having these conversations. I'd love to go back to the old days when kids came to school and things were just a very different scenario. But unfortunately, that's not the reality of the world that we live in. So having the hard conversations is important, and making sure that we continue to work as a community to make our schools as safe as they can be is also very important, and we keep evolving and getting better at that. So thank you again. The board is going to be convening in a board meeting just down the hallway, but I'm sure other folks are able to stay if you have specific questions to help out, get those answered for you. So we'll applaud you at this point from the school angle, because we want to thank parents for coming and joining us.